So could we find out what oligosaccharides are? If we find out what oligosaccharides are, Sarah, if you do, could you find out if we have the digestive enzymes to break down any of the oligosaccharides? Do we have those digestive enzymes? We obviously have some starch splitting enzymes, right? They're called amylase.
A carbohydrate, whose molecules are composed of a relatively small number of monosaccharide units. For example, oligosaccharides are formed when two or more monosaccharides join together by glycosidic bonds. Examples include sucrose, lactose, and maltose.
Do we have the digestive enzymes to break down sucrose? Or do we need to? You're saying sucrose is a oligosaccharide?
Yeah.
Or when two sucroses come together, it forms an oligosaccharide? I'm not sure what you said.
Examples include sucrose, lactose, and maltose.
Do you have the digestive enzymes to break down lactose?
For a period of time.
Nope, not anymore.
Well, how about... But it still tastes sweet, so something's happening. There's other things going on there, perhaps.
Cannot be digested.
Oh, cannot be digested.
Pass through to the colon, where they promote the growth of bifidobacteria, which are beneficial to gut health.
Cannot be digested. So that answered your question. You don't even have to look it up. Oligosaccharides. But there's a guy who says that we are natural starch eaters. Are oligosaccharides polysaccharides?
They may.
Well, so then you can't say no. It wouldn't be a no
Why
answer.
would there be two different names?
Because they fall in a subcategory of one of a bigger category.
Oligo is a poly?
I don't know. We have to find out about all the saccharides. We have to break down the starches into their component groups.
Like our body does every day.
Our body doesn't. Our body doesn't break any of them down. That's the whole point. Except for a few, because we do have amylase.
Wow.
So what is the amylase for? It's a starch splitting enzyme. What starches does it split? Does it split oligosaccharides? Sarah's saying no, it doesn't split the oligosaccharides. The physiologists say we have no digestive enzymes to break down oligosaccharides. When you ask me, is there starch in a banana, we need to know what kind of starch, because if it's oligosaccharides, then you cannot digest it. That starch. You can digest the sugars, but not the starch. Even with your starch splitting enzyme. At which point you go, wow, I've got starch splitting enzymes, but they're absolutely useless for most of the things I eat that are starch, and it kind of makes the starch solution look like less of a solution if we can eat it but we can't digest it.
Be a problem.
So beans are oligosaccharides, is that correct?
Well, I think there are oligosaccharides in beans.
There you go. Okay, that's kind of how.
But there may be other kinds of saccharides in beans, and we want to find out what. We would love to end up with a nice chart of starch, and then polysaccharides, these kinds of saccharides, oligosaccharides, whatever, wherever they go. Monosaccharides are usually called sugars. So, what do we call starch if we find it in an animal? It's called glycogen.
Okay,
starch in an animal is glycogen. I mean, I think it's rather confusing for a lot of people that most people do not understand that starch and glycogen are the same thing. It's just whether it's a plant or an animal. What do we call an enzyme if it's not in an animal or if it's not in a living thing? Hey, Timmy, what would you call something that works like an enzyme but you don't find it in a plant or an animal? You just find it in physical chemistry.
A catalyst?
You call it a catalyst. Exactly correct. So they're using two different names. And this is just a method of keeping us in the dark to the point where we can't understand things. Why do they call glycogen and starch? Why don't they just call it some kind of a starch, since that's what it is? It's some kind of a starch. It just happens to be a starch in an animal. They don't want you to understand that glycogen and starch are the same. We take sugars, convert them into starch in the same way that we take simple fats and fatty acids and convert them into solid fats, right? Where we compound them, we make them into closed loops when they were open loops, open chains, and this is what allows our processes to go on. So I think it's important to know. Otherwise, at some point it goes aha, and then we'll know which starch is the starch in buckwheat. Is it the solution? Is brown rice, or is puffed rice, or is baked potato, or is popped corn? Is there some starch that we're made to eat? You know, like it's the exception, or are we truly not starch eaters no matter what Dr. McDougall says? I mean, he's backed himself into a corner, now he's trying to prove we're starch eaters. If you really want to know, you could use his own logic, because he says that human beings have more than twice as many starch splitting enzymes as a gorilla. Therefore, we're obviously starch eaters because we have twice as much starch splitting enzymes as the gorilla does, or the orangutan does. So how many do they have? On a scale of 1 to 100, they have 1, we have 3. But it's still a scale of 1 to 100. On a scale of 1 to 100, a 3 counts as pretty low. We're not cows.